The scientists say July was the hottest month on record since, guess how long? As far as they know anyway. Guess how long? Since 1880. That's how much years? 150 years. So it's no surprise that Jamaica's energy demand has soared. Everybody plugging in that AC, buying AC, plugging in that fan and working just extra hard. And what does this mean for your JPS bill? Joining me now, we have Director of System Operations at JPS, Linkoy Small. Hi, Linkoy.
How are you doing?
Not bad. Trying to cope with this internet that's giving me some trouble. Okay, yes, there you are again. How are you doing? How are you dealing with this heat?
It's crazy, right? But we're trying to keep as cool as possible, right? And I'll just encourage everybody just to keep cool and try and stay safe, right? Because the heat out here is crazy.
Yeah. So JPS disclosed that electricity demand hit a record high in July. That's last month. We now have peak demand, or we had peak demand of 692 megawatts of power, up from 675 megawatts just a month before. So how is JPS meeting that demand?
Well, how we have been meeting that demand, the last year we recorded a peak for this country was in 2017. And that peak at that time was 6666.67, right? Funny to say that number. And what we have seen now is a record almost 4% jump, right? From 2017 to July the 12th. That was when we had that peak. How we have been meeting this peak, actually been doing a very good job. We have had no incidents in serving that demand from our customers, right? These are some things that we anticipate from time to time. Every time we operate our system, we have generating units that will serve your load, and we'll have some units on standby with reserve capacity to serve that demand. So we were in pretty good shape this year to serve that excess demand, thank God.
Oh, so what has led to this demand? Like, have you noticed a difference in household usage versus business usage?
Well, it's funny that you said that, because I actually have my team of engineers going as deep as possible to try and see what were the drivers. And what we have seen so far is that our residential customers, right, picked up the lion's share of that increase. Because if you're at home and you're hot, you're going to want to turn on those fans. We hear that all of the companies selling the Panasonics and the Prism saying that they are almost out of stock for air conditioning units. So we have a high uptake in residential consumption as well as some commercial. But the residential really accounted for the lion's share.
Not surprising, because yeah, the fan working overtime, the AC, people just buying them off. And you said earlier, though, that you're in a good position to meet the demand, but we have had some outages. So what happened there?
All right, so those outages that might happen from time to time are due to various reasons, but it had nothing to do with our inability to meet that demand. What would have driven some of those outages? For example, you from time to time you'll have motor vehicle accidents, cars hitting poles. Funny enough, some persons actually trying to steal electricity and they're throwing up the wires and they miss the wire that they want to hit and hit out the what you call the high tension wires above them, and it will end up taking out an entire area. And then on some other occasions, you might have it due to the weather, right? So there are various reasons why we might take our customers, but for this year, none of it was due to our inability to meet this increase in demand.
But you did have at least one, I think that was in June, that JPS, the press release came out and it said that you ended up doing load shedding. So explain what load shedding is.
All right. So if you look at everything as a typical balance, as the customers demand electricity, we try to generate it, right? So we have generating plants on standby, always ready to serve that load, that demand. And whenever you have a disturbance in that balance, if you do not have insufficient generating units at that given point in time to serve that demand, then it might cause what you call load shedding. The customer is the load. So in order to keep your system operable, you have to remove that load, because otherwise it will create an overloaded condition, too much congestion, and your grid can actually even collapse within even 2 to 5 seconds. So
So
what
isn't
happens?
that just a pretty way of saying you can't manage the load?
No. Because what happened in that was an abnormal situation where, due to weather-related events and other things, we lost couple generating units on that day due to different faults. It was almost like a perfect Murphy's law. So the demand even on that day was not high. It was not near that record peak, that 692 that we're talking about. But a series of catastrophic events actually happened. And this is not unique to Jamaica, because I've been talking to some other colleagues in North America and Europe, and they have had other instances to where, just due to faults, you drive a car and the car actually breaks down. Things like that will happen from time to time. So on that day, we lost a lot of our generating units due to multiple events all happening at the same time. And as a result of us losing those generating units, which would have supplied the demand, and the other generating units which were offline at the time, those that I mentioned that were in reserve, they do not start up as quickly as possible to basically to put you back in a position to serve that demand. So what you have to do in that instant is that you have to relieve the system of some customers, unfortunately, right, or load shed until you can get those other units, which take 5 to 10 minutes to start up, and then you restore those customers.
How do you decide which customers to shed?
Well, it will depend on which area the country might have a high level of congestion, right? So you have to shed enough to basically keep your system stable. So one area might be generating a lot of electricity at that time, and therefore, in the event, in that case that happened, we had to shed a lot of those like highly residential areas, some persons in the corporate areas and catching there, but we have to relieve those customers from the grid very quickly. Because if we fail to do that, then it will result in a collapse of the entire grid in an instant. And that was an event that, honestly, we're still doing investigations to ensure that we do not have a repeat of that. We have to learn from that, and we also want to take this opportunity to apologize to Jamaican public, because they deserve the best, and every day we're actually trying to ensure that we give them the best.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned you choose the areas with a high level of congestion, because somehow, and I may be wrong, but somehow I feel like electricity supply is much less reliable in rural areas, and that we hear complaints from rural customers much more often than those in urban areas, saying that, you know, they're having these blackouts and stuff.
Oh no. In fact, on that occasion, more persons in the urban areas lost electricity than those in the rural areas. So there's no segregation or
On that occasion, but that was
right.
an anomaly. But
That
on
was
a
an
regular basis,
and on
do
a regular
rural
basis.
customers have more problems with stable electricity supply than urban ones?
No, what might happen is that in the rural area, just based on the topology of the area. So if you're talking in the urban areas, you do not have a lot of vegetation or trees growing along the roadway. You might have a lot of civil network, a lot of construction. But in some rural areas, you might have, you have to be running lines through mountains, through hilly terrains. And sometimes, if we do not have the ability to get into some areas and to remove some of these vegetation from the line, it will cause problems. We have a lot of rain and lightning activity actually in the rural area. And what happens sometimes is that lightning might strike a tree and it breaks that branch, and that branch will drop on a power line, or the lightning itself might strike the power line. So there's nothing that we are preferring to give power to persons in the urban areas or in the corporate area more than somebody living in a Hanover, in a St. Elizabeth, thereabout. We're not in the business of doing that. We see all customer classes, all parishes as equal, and it is our duty or responsibility to ensure that we serve everybody as best as possible.
Orville has a comment. Orville says, but those disruptions don't reflect on the bill.
Really, Orville? No. So let's answer Orville quickly if you want me to. Go ahead. If you do not use electricity at any given point in time, once your electricity goes, then if you had one of those old meters, which we are phasing out, then the old meters, which normally would spin, then it stops spinning. Once there is no power being registered in your house, you will not be charged. It will not be like other services who still charge some kind of flat rate. For JPS, once there's a disruption, right, then there's no charge. And in fact, if we do not perform at certain standards in maintaining power supply, JPS operates in a regulated environment. We can't just do what we want to do and get away with it, contrary to what some people might think. So if we do not perform at our best, then there are penalties that are issued out to us by the OUR. So it is within the business of JPS to try and ensure that we keep the lights on. And if you want to look at it from layman's term, Orville, if you're selling a product, the minute you stop selling that product, you can't collect from the customers. So if it's a business you're running, it's within your duty to try and ensure that that product stays on and has the best quality at any given point in time.
Javon wants to know what causes extended load shedding that occurs for weeks on end. Do you have load shedding going on for weeks at a time?
I don't know which country that probably happens on Venus, but not here. Right? But definitely not here for us in Jamaica. We do not have customers who we do load shedding for in a week. Load shedding basically, for example, on occasions like that, might work out to sometimes at least between an hour to an hour and a half as an extreme. But as I said, you customers might be restored within 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how quickly we can get some of those backup units online. One of the good things to note as well is that some of the plans that JPS is putting forward in the future in collaboration with the energy sector, with the ministry, with the OUR, is to put on what you call battery storage, some things that are so quick that they will store the power, and once you need them very quickly, they will release the power as quickly as you lose some generating units. So as we try to improve our systems, you would realize that the cases of load shedding will start to reduce once you have that new battery storage technology, which is something that we are working on to get on our grid as quickly as possible. In fact, our first battery storage system was put into service here in Jamaica in 2019. And to date, that kind of technology that we have remains the largest such technology in the world. So we are investing as much as possible in improving the reliability of our supply. We don't get it right all the time, but we're getting there, and we're doing that because our customers deserve the best.
So Javon, if you can be more specific, let me know in the comments where
right.
You
we need to find out where Javon lives, because there's no load shedding for weeks. I wouldn't have a job if there's load shedding for weeks. No, not go set Javon. Not go so.
Well, let me tell you, there are a lot of comments coming in. As you can imagine, JPS is always a hot topic. Light bill is always a hot topic. So let me just go straight to the comments again.
Right, because I'm feeling the heat in this seat, Kalila. So
it's a hot seat.
Yeah, it's a hot seat.
A hot seat. So direct text says, I have experienced 3-hour blackout.
Yeah, right.
Just aware. It would have been helpful to know where. But that does happen from time to time. I've noticed it, but not
from time to time. For example,
not regularly from my experience.
It's not regularly, and it's not a load shedding situation. It might be one of those cases in which, let us say, I remember an example that happened not too long ago, where somebody, like a tree limb, fell on somebody's line, right? So remember now, JPS wires extend from miles and miles. If something happens in the night, we have to sometimes send out our crews to find these problems. So picture you driving along every street, every roadway, looking for some kind of defect on a wire, and somebody has to be using a flashlight. It's not in the night, right? It's not in the day, sorry. So you have to basically be using flashlights and strobe lights to try and find that fault. And it might take you sometimes just an hour and a half just to find the problem. And then once you get there, then you will have to mobilize your team, depending on what that problem is, to try, though, if the wires get broken or a pole gets damaged, especially in the case of motor vehicle accidents, then you have to plant a pole, put back the wires, and that might take long. So we're sorry for that 3-hour outage, but sometimes these things do happen. But thank goodness that our crews can respond to them quickly. And it helps also when you are customers, you call in or you use the JPS mobile application to log whenever you're seeing a problem where you have an outage. That helps us to get to the area quickly and reduce the time that you're out.
So Javon is back with more details. And he says, I live in St. Mary, and we had a period where there was continued load shedding, especially in the night. The lights kept blinking and some sections of the house were without power.
Okay. I don't know what happened in that instant, but let me share something with you. Some people, I remember this incident, some people actually steal electricity. What they try to do is, sometimes they don't get it right. And they throw up the wire, they climb the pole, or they use a stick and push up the thing. And when they do it and they don't even make those connections properly, it tends to create some sudden overloads on the system, or it's what you call short circuits, right? Sorry. So it creates these short circuits, and you might see like dim, it goes off, on and off, on and off, on and off, because they're trying to get it right. It's damaging their equipment. They don't care about you, They don't care about the legitimate customers. So they're pushing up these wires and pushing up the hockey stick and everything to try and make good contact. And while doing that, they're also shorting out your supplies. In fact, that thing on the pole that some of you call panel, it's called a transformer. Sometimes what eventually happens is that they don't do these things right. They overload these transformers and it causes them to explode. And that also result, when you hear that loud explosion, that will result in customers being out. And then when you drive into the area now, everybody turns aside all of a sudden. You don't see the hockey stick or anything going up again. So then there's nothing. And the minute you drive out of there, they're once again, they try to steal electricity. So sometimes that happens while you have that on and off supply, right? So I'm just saying that you can be mindful of that, but we can actually do a little bit deeper investigation, right? When we come off the air.
Oh boy, the comments just keep coming in. So next question, let me see which one I should take next. Charlene says that JPS needs a WhatsApp number where we can message you when there's an outage. Do you guys have anything like that? I know you can report it on the app.
You can report on the app, and you have different social media handles that persons can actually report outages on. But let me tell you something, Charlene. Get the JPS mobile app. Not only can you just report an outage, you can check where an outage is. You can check the consumption. You can also check what your next light bill is projected to be, and to see if you need to tell your children or Jose, say, boy, you're running the AC or the fan too much, and turn it off. You can check it to an hourly basis, and you can also pay those bills online, right? So I would suggest to you that, yes, you can use social media and those things that we have available, but get the app. Is the best thing since sliced bread.
Speaking of the app, Maurice says, what's the rationale for JPS forcing everyone to use the app? The Morant Bay branch was closed and not everyone has access to the internet and not all seniors are tech savvy. I know what he means by forcing people to use the app.
Yeah, but I think I get the point that he's making. It is not forcing people to use the app, and we do realize that not everybody is tech savvy, as you said. Last week, I can be honest with you, my grandaunt stick me up in trying to pay a bill or wanting to know her bill and everything, and she trying to understand how the app work and everything like that. So as time progresses, we have different services. It's not just the app we're forcing. There are still some offices, probably might not be in your direct area that you're used to, that you do, but you can always still call the JPS lines, right, to get information if you need it, right? We know that it has been an inconvenience to some customers who we have closed the office, right? But we're trying our best to maintain that connectivity, because it's always important that we stay in touch with the customers, right? So we apologize for that, right? And for those seniors, we keep some of the offices open. Sometimes we even have these kind of mobile units that go into the areas to take care of that. So we're going to try and get to everyone, right? So bear with us for a little.
So Hugh says you're very responsive on the app. So congratulating on you on that. Can't complain, he says. And then we have Honorine saying, are you the PR person? Because you need a raise. He said your convincing skills are on point. So let me just remind people of your title. You're actually Director of Systems Operations.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get back on topic, because some of these questions that we have here, Linkoy is not in a position to answer, as that's not.
But I like this one. So probably all the other persons in chat can just copy and paste, see needs, raise, and everything. You know, I'll accept all donations, right?
All right. So going back to the load shedding, you said it happens from time to time when you have certain issues. What is it looking like for September, the rest of the year? Can we expect more load shedding to occur? Is it something that you plan, or it's usually just
For any modern utility company, load shedding is not something that's an option. You don't do that. You don't plan that, right? You put in a lot of mitigation measures as much as possible to avoid that. However, though, if something's happening, please know that we're going into the hurricane season. So for some of us who watch the weather, so tonight, or we're looking on the radar, we see where Franklin is heading up towards the direction of Bermuda. We see the next one that's heading towards Florida. as you get deeper into the rainy season, a lot of things might happen, especially in the months of September. So we are not planning for anything to happen. As far as we know, all the systems are good, but just note that sometimes things might happen from time to time. If you get rain, if you get that tropical storm, right, that takes out certain areas of the country, then it might affect our supply. But there is no plan to load shed.
Okay. Deco says, at a heat knockout the transformer, combined with little load with the what? Customer then put combined with a little load what the customer then put on it, yeah man, it will pop down for true. I figured
Yeah.
that one out. So
Yeah.
does heat have anything to do with the
So
transformers going
the
down?
transformers do get hot, right? But they have their own cooling system in it that they can manage. But what tends to happen sometimes with the transformers, as I said, if you're stealing, or if a man cut down an ackee tree, or you might try to pick mango and miss, or sometimes you might have some equipment failure. If those kind of things happen, then they would cause the transformers. There's a thing on the transformer, it's called a fuse that protects it, because you don't want to keep buying transformers, and those things will operate, protect the transformer, and the customers will be out. But there's no heating that's impacting the transformers, and it's not the little load, the excess loading that the customers use. Those are not the things that are blowing the transformer. In fact, when we're doing the design, we always leave additional capacity for future growth. So that's something that we have in mind, right? So we're doing our best for you.
So I have a couple of people who are complaining about how much their light bill has gone up. So we do expect that the bills go up in the summer months. I notice that every single year at my home because we pay the light bill. So I do notice that. But people are saying, a couple of them saying it's gone up by 50%, which sounds like a lot. So we have Sir Nation says, I live alone, work a 9 to 5 during the summer. I work an extra 2 hours daily when I'm home. I only use my typical everyday appliances. So I know my average monthly bill rate 2 months now, I see a 50% increase.
So she's seen a 50%. So I live alone. She works a 9 to 5. So is it Sir Nation Meds? Is it say if this person is working from home? So okay, normally you work at home and it's good. And let me tell you something. I'll give you a good story here. About 2-3 weeks ago, I decided that I would work from home, right? I have the option to work from home. And I never realized that it is so hot out there. So normally you stay home and you work from home and it's okay. You have the door open, the windows open, you're good. For that day that I was home, and I have air conditioning at my house for that room, I thought I could just run that AC for 2 hours. And then after that, it would shut down the place, it would stay cool and everything. I had to end up running that AC for that entire 9 to 5 period. And then Sir Med just wrote on his thing that he also added an additional 2 hours, right? That extra cooling that you needed, my bill actually went up by more than 50%, right? Just for that period, because I also was doing a lot of staying on and off, staying home and everything, right? So with that increased need for cooling, especially in the nights, right? Because one of the things that is happening, this heat, it does not only exist during the day, but you make 12 o'clock catch you in the night and your fan are also not running, right? You will end up saying, all right, so you said, so you know what I talk about. So you'll be sweating all through the night. So your bill is not just because of the 9 to 5. I guarantee and him can come back and type that he's also doing some levels of cooling and running that fan or the AC straight through the night, because the heat is so lingering, right? It's not just a daily event. So don't look at it as just your 9 to 5. The entire heat profile of the country and probably of this globe has actually gone out. I was talking to one of my friends who works in Florida on their grid, and about 2 weeks ago, they hit the highest peak ever for their section of the grid. So none of this is unique to Jamaica. It's happening all over the world.
I'm seeing a lot of questions about stealing electricity and who pays for it. Well, let me just stress, guys, Linko is a director of, what's the title again?
Operations. I run the grid, right?
So he runs the grid. So I can't ask Linkoy these questions. It wouldn't be fair of me to ask Linkoy these particular questions, but I do see a couple about the system itself and how it runs. This one comes from Steve, who wants to know, he says, JPS is one of the most expensive energy producers in the Caribbean. What is being done to reduce the cost of electricity? I think that's a pretty good question.
And that's a good question, Steve, right? And that's a fair question. So one of the problems, so it's not JPS is one of the most expensive. It is Jamaica. I saw one of the comments earlier in your thing saying that JPS needs competition. So just to let your viewers know, JPS is not a monopoly in electricity generation. In fact, our share, our market share of electricity generation is only about a third, 33%. 66% of electricity comes from private users, not JPS. So there's no monopoly. There is competition in the generation market. So we're just getting that out there. So so the electricity rate is a Jamaican problem because we also have other parties who are generating power for us. So let's look at one of the key things that goes into electricity generation: fuel. No, the last I checked, there was no gas or there's no oil here in Jamaica. So these are things that we have to be importing. So we have to be importing gas, we have to be importing oil, and so to keep some of those generating plants running. The strategy for this now is there's something that JPS is working along with the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, as well as in collaboration with other energy stakeholders, the OUR, to develop what is called an integrated resource plan. And what that plan does, it's a 20-year look to see this is the future of the country. What new technologies exist out there that we can incorporate onto the grid to ensure that not only do we make electricity reliable, but we make it affordable, and what old technology needs to be taken out of the grid and replaced so that we make new room for these new technologies to come in. So in that plan, we have been doing some assessment, and the objective of that plan, as far as and this is one of JPS's focus as well, is to ensure that those bills go down. The rate must go down. So while we're working with the government, that is something that we're stressing, that the rates have to go down. And this plan is so designed to get the rates down by getting new technologies in, including using renewable technology, right? Because we have a lot of wind and we have a lot of sun here. So instead of relying on imported fuel, what we plan to do, and this is our national direction, is to incorporate some renewables on the grid so that we don't need to buy fuel from somebody else. We use the naturally occurring wind and the naturally occurring sun to generate electricity. We know though that by design, some of the wind and the solar, the wind doesn't blow every day and the sun doesn't shine every time. So we are trying to couple that with some energy storage so that when the wind goes off or in the evening when the sun goes down, we can use that energy storage to pump power back into the grid to avoid load shedding and to ensure that we serve the customer. So that plan that we're doing in collaboration, and it's not a plan that's led by JPS, it's led by the ministry. And there's a lot of stakeholders, including JPS, who are working on it to try and get your rates down. Because as customers, Jamaica deserves cheaper electricity rates, and that is one of the mandates of this company, as well as, I know, the government of Jamaica.
But on the matter of rates, there's been a report that bills are actually going up. Customers will see an average 1.6% increase in electricity bills following the OUR's review of your tariff adjustment submission. So when should we expect to see that increase? And on what basis was that granted?
So, okay, I think those bills will be, that increase will be seen in your next month's reflection of the bill. So on what basis? All right. So just as any business, right, you might have changes in your overheads, foreign exchange, because a lot of the resources and raw materials sometimes that we use in electricity production do not come from Jamaica. So units have to be maintained. You have to buy wires, transformers. None of those things come from in here. So you have to be converting Jamaican dollars into US dollars to buy that. You might need an adjustment on your exchange rate. Inflation is another thing. JPS, as I said, also is judged on its performance in the previous year. So one key thing to note, JPS does not just get up or can never ever get up and set rates. The responsibility of setting rates in the country is that of the OUR, the Offices of Utility Regulation. JPS cannot determine that, okay, it needs to do a 5, 10, 2% increase and we're just getting passed on to the customers. We cannot do that. So every year there's a rate review that is done, right? And we make a submission to the regulator, the OUR. They review it, and then based on what they see They will determine if that's fair, if that's reasonable, right? We have a good regulator who basically tries as best as possible to ensure that fair competition is in the market, right? And then at the end of it, no, this 1.6% increase was granted. What does 1.6%? 1.6% mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a light bill. I'm a $10,000 man, right? So if I pay 10,000, I'm just going to average it out for everybody. I pay 10,000 this month. It means next month I'll be paying an increase of $10,160, right, for 1 month, assuming that my consumption remains the same, right? I'm consuming the same electricity, and that the fuel and all of the parameters that goes into the bill are held constant. So just based on that increase, it means they're paying $160 extra. Couple of weeks ago, I remember I know somebody, and they said, boy, this supermarket thing don't make sense no more. You're going to the supermarket with $10,000 4 months ago. Now, the last I check, if you go into the supermarket today with $10,000, right, you're going to be probably $4,000 short of buying what you need to buy, right, on a weekly basis. So you're paying $14,000 now for groceries, that the same groceries that normally cost $10,000 on a weekly basis. So I could do a little maths here. It's 4,000 every week, 4 weeks in a month, 4,000 times 4, that's $16,000, right? And your supermarket can raise the cost of the products whenever they choose to. There is that a regulated sector. So $16,000 versus $160. I don't think JPS is doing too bad, right? In terms of us making you pay $160 versus 16,000. So it is something that has to be done because we have to cover off some overheads. But let me say this, it is never within our business just to try and raise the rates, because we need to ensure that the product is affordable so that the country can grow. So I'm not just going to gloss over it and say it's 1.6%, man, pay the bill. No, right? That's why, in which a question that was asked earlier by, I think it was Steve, we have to try as best as possible to get the overall rates down, right? But from time to time, based on what is happening in any given business, you have to make minor adjustments. And that is what has happened in this case, right? In terms of the increase.
Oh boy. All right. Well, we'll do what we can to cope. Thank you so much, Linkoy. This is a topic we could talk about all night, but we have limited time. So thanks for sharing some perspective.
And it was, thank you very much for having me, right? And we can do this again, right?